All right, so I'm live with a special guest here, Brian Ray with is Atos. Is that how you pronounce it?
You
Yeah,
sure can. Atos. I don't think.
Atos.
I think they said somewhere online that there's several ways to pronounce it. It's a French company, um, and I'm from Maven Wave, which is an acquisition through there. We're still staying as a group for now, but becoming one cloud. And happy to talk to you. Know we're big fans. My team's big fans of yours, so it's an honor to be a guest of yours.
Cool. Yeah, nice to connect with you again. I know we've connected many times, like indirectly, because you've been involved in Python for at
Yeah,
least as long
I
as
just
me.
did a search when I was looking for your email. I said, "Wow, you were on the Mac Python uh, group mailing list back in 2006, and then this other list on 2000. It's been a while. So yeah, I got involved with Python 2002 and
Yeah,
founded.
probably around when I got.
Yeah, Chicago Python User Group was a joint venture, but I held that torch for 14 years or something like that before moving out to LA. And yeah, I still write some Python here and there. I like Python a lot.
So you're in LA now.
Yep, I live in LA. I still have a house in Chicago, but live in LA and have been enjoying the tech community here quite a bit. I've learned a lot from Silicon Beach, is what they call it, and I've been involved with Todd Terrazas and the AILA community. And it's a different world here, honestly. It's a little different from Chicago, where I come from, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot in Web3, and there's a lot of noise too. There's a lot, but there's some good stuff too coming out of here.
Yeah, that's my hometown. So I grew up in
Right.
LA, and I used to play ultimate frisbee on the beach in Santa Monica for years, and I considered at one point trying to go pro, and then I realized that the pay was zero. So is that even pro? I don't know. I would say no, it's not pro.
There's a lot of fun. Yeah,
It is fun though.
yeah. I live downtown LA right now, and I mean we're looking at moving to Pasadena potentially, but I do head out to the west side to visit the tech people and also the young beachgoers occasionally. So yeah, definitely
Cool.
LA is a cool place.
Yeah, Pasadena. I lived in Pasadena for 3 years when I worked at Caltech, and this beautiful. I mean, beautiful. Like the whole area is a unique place, and I think one of the things that's was always surprising when I was there. This was 2000 to maybe 2006 is when I was in the Santa Monica and Pasadena area. Was that Caltech? The people there are just off the charts, brilliant,
Yeah.
and that there wasn't more of like a kind of a tech startup thing. I was kind of surprised about that,
Right.
but it does appear that I'm assuming.
Less Jet Propulsion Lab is considered a tech startup, which I don't think it is, but
Yeah,
certainly some things going on there. There's some with the architectural school, but it's not. I spoke there before about becoming a culture fit with data scientists fitting into consulting, and that's my area of specialty now. Is I manage consultants. I have a good team right now, and I've had good teams in the past. A great team right now, and we split out recently. So our focus was purely consulting and broad and writing models, and we decided, well, half of us should be just MLOps experts, and half of us should be consultants. I split the teams a little bit. Now I have a team just dedicated to doing MLOps, and that's all we do.
yeah, maybe that would be a good thing to go for an overview. Is like, where do you see the world right now and some of the opportunities? It sounds like you see. I mean, obviously, consulting is always there, but it sounds like you see enough of a lucrative opportunity in creating models that you're investing into that, and that would be, I think, a great thing to talk about. Is like, why do you see that as an opportunity, and what does that space look like?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with creating models. And I think that the value in business is more understood today than ever, where you really are getting ROI out of solving problems with data science now. So everyone's kind of accepted that. Said, yeah, I see it now. I use it on my phone. I live there in that world. So it's a different business climate than it was a couple of years ago. So we already realized there's ROI behind it. And now we're at that point where kind of what DevOps was not so long ago, where we need to operationalize it, and not, besides yourself, no one's written a book on it. There's been very few who've really thought about it, and we have. So we put together a 10-step process of looking at MLOps, and we're taking that to the enterprises. We're taking it to organizations that have hundreds of data scientists. We're taking it to organizations that have just a few. And it's a way of thinking about it, to go through and categorize the models that you already have, to profile the types of data scientists that will be using a system, and going through the entire process, not just the production of models, but also the exploration of models and uses of feature stores and other concepts, and how the data is managed, how it's governed, and the governance around it. And we really have a holistic approach to it. And whenever I tell clients about this, they latch onto it and they ask for it. So we have 6 or 7 huge engagements concurrently right now. We've done several, and we're ongoing projects. They're all Fortune 500 type companies, and some of them are global as well. So it's been a lot of hybrid teach to fish methodology. So we kind of embrace the idea that we may not be the people maintaining this MLOps outcome, what you end up with. So we also teach people a little bit about whatever it is they need to do. And there's a huge hyperscaler angle to it too. So they're involved oftentimes with the cloud. And that's our core businesses was the cloud, last 15 years at Maven Wave. So it's no big surprise that we're very aligned with GCP and AWS and Azure. But we're also very aligned with some of the data science providers out there, whether it be something like Databricks or Coiled, or, there's a lot of the more paid ones. And then extremely involved with the open source as well, where I have some of the contributors to Kubeflow and stuff like that on my staff.
Yeah, that's a good setup. I mean, I agree with you that the opportunity, it seems like, for the space is early stages, and that, my career when I was in the Bay Area, this was probably 2000, let's just call it 2016 to 2006, something like that, like when I was in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
That one of the things that I was always shocked about as I would go, it's like, oh wow, I'm at the top of the best place, or I'm in the place where it's all happening.
Yeah.
And I would get hired in a company, and it's like, wait, why is your build server broken? Or I would work at some huge company, and they said, yeah, our project has been rewritten 3 times, and in different languages, and we're almost there. We're a year late, but we just need to hire a performance engineer.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's not what you need. Like, you have a bad process. That's what's going on, is you have a bad process. I see, like, the exact same thing with MLOps, is that there's people, especially because they're coming from an academic background, a lot of the data scientists, is that they weren't aware of everything that happened in the last 10 years with DevOps. And it's they're like kind of rediscovering some of these things, like, oh wow, build server, that's a good idea. It's like, yeah, that's right.
Well, or just get off your laptop. I've seen a lot of folks, like, well, why is it taking so long to load a terabyte in my Pandas data frame running my Jupyter notebook off my laptop? And my laptop's right here, I could fry an egg on the laptop, because they're just burning it. And I'm like, what, have you heard of the cloud? I mean, we've solved this problem already. Let me help you. And sometimes it's organizational. It's like, well, my organization we don't have a place to do our work. And I'm like, really? Well, that's unusual for an organization that's self-advertising as being AI first. Sometimes you are solving problems, you're showing ROI on this, and you don't have a build server or a place to build models, and it's ridiculous.
Well, and it was funny. I always have, like, kind of shower thoughts, about, like, weird things come up to mind, and I think about it. And this morning I was actually thinking about one, which is that if you were going to get advice from somebody about MLOps in particular, and because I have a little bit of a foot in the academic world, is I would say to someone, look at their I forget what the rating is for how many papers you've written and cited. I forget what there's I don't know. There's some Q score or something for that, which is I mean, it means you're smart. Like people, people it's not nothing, right? But I would say that could be like a log transform where you just want to maybe see like, yeah, that's something. But then the real one you care about is like how many lines of production MLOps code has the computer science professor written? Oh, zero. Well, then you're going to have to take the zero in there. It's going to have to be part of the formula for
That's
the
funny.
weight of what it is. So
It's
I
like
think
the
that's
net promoter score for data science.
yeah, like I think the thing that's missing is that if you want to implement MLOps, AI, ML, you're going to have to ask people who have actually got real world experience writing code for advice.
We're right. So that's the key is that I call us unicorn hunters, and in the way that we find a pedigree, we have a critical mass now, but we started looking for a pedigree of people with both data science credentials and experience and engineering experience, and can have a conversation with a client without staring at their shoelaces. So like we find these folks that can actually help operationalize this through their journey in a way that also, as we're doing this, we like to onboard use cases, either existing ones or new ones. We like to onboard use cases and show real business ROI while we're building out an MLOps infrastructure. So they can say, well, it's hard sometimes for the C-suite to see the value in infrastructure always, right? It's always been like, is that a technical debt? What do I need to do to invest in this to get to here? But if you do it at the same time, you're showing ROI on a particular use case that's solving a real problem, real business problem, whether it be document intelligence or natural language processing or video or whatever problem they're having, and there's a huge number of them. And to see that platform is helping you do that better. And we're seeing that all the time. We're seeing big shippers, package shippers that are getting increased accuracy on their models that they've been working on for a long time, just by having better operations behind them and having more access to data in the cloud and having more features to use in their model and having some stuff that has nothing to do with how good of a data scientist you are. It has to do with how good of an organization you are. And if you have a partner that can help you get there. So, and they're seeing really substantial improvements on things like package delivery. We predict downtime and roller coasters. We do, a lot of supply chain problems. We, predict costs and forecasting problems. We do document intelligence. So there's a lot of getting there. And if the story is told right and executed correctly, the C-suite's happy with the results as it's going on. The technologists are happy with it from an infrastructure standpoint because it's something that they cannot lose sleep on, that it actually is self-maintaining and it's self-healing to some degree. And then the data scientists are thrilled because they have a great place to try new things. They have exploratory data analysis that's in a place where they don't run into a lot of limitations of dependencies. They have a place to build models and massively try models and keep track of them. And then there's a governance aspect that everyone's kind of has their lens on about being able to really say that from a prediction, what is the whole lineage all the way from the beginning of the data source of that data in a way that I can govern it. So I can go and keep track of the model pipelines that built the model, keep track of the model that's in production, keep track of the features that's in the model, keep track of the exploration that was done, and have a place that it all kind of keeps track of itself. So you're not bending over backwards trying to decompose what happened. And then when you want to introduce things like human in the loop interactivity with ML and AI, it's already kind of almost there. Nobody out there has it perfect. And part of our group is R&D, and we have about 200 different tools that we keep very close eyes on that contribute to this MLOps platform. And the choices are different depending on your types of problem you're trying to solve, what your hyperscaler alignment is or multiple, what kind of business, what industry you're in, what region you're in sometimes. But there's repeating thinking. And that's what's missing. It wasn't really just a tool problem. It's a process. It's a process problem. It's a way of thinking about and measuring it as you go along the process. If I can hand that to someone and they say, oh, here's a guide for kind of how to think about it, whether you have those experts or not, you can see where the gaps are and you can execute on it, and you can get that end state where everything's working, it's comfortable to maintain, it's comfortable to build more models, and then you can start taking on more use cases. And then that's where the business gets excited, because, hey, not only am I accomplishing a couple of use cases here and there, but now I'm finding and discovering more use cases, and I'm delivering those in production one after another. And I have a unified way to do that. And I can start democratizing some of those things too. I can say, well, hey, that prediction is maybe useful for this department over here. Or I want to put this data science team on the platform as well, and they have a different domain, but here's a place to put them. So it's had huge impact of the way that we're doing business and delivering data science.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought process there. I think you're on to a good philosophy, which is the organizational problems typically are the real issue with a lot of delivery in traditional software engineer problems, and then also MLOps, because the tools are helpful. I mean, it's good to use the right tools for the problem you're solving, but ultimately there has to be like an organizational process that's repeatable that leads to an ROI. When I was a CTO, one of the things that I was always a huge fan of was, basically creating a process where there was a weekly deliverable. So like everybody had a demo every week. The project was incrementally getting better, and then we would release mobile apps, updates, and there was like an actual thing you did, right? Which was, we produced the mobile app, and we have a new feature, and now we're getting, higher engagement, and we're selling more products, so there's a tangible thing, but kind of working back from, this is our goal, we want to sell more products or merchandise, and so we need to like have frequent updates, and then when you break it down and you get into like what are the actual details, like, oh well, we have continuous delivery, and we have integration tests, and we have functional tests, and we have all these kinds of things, and it really a lot of the problem is really a process problem for organizations.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. And we learned a lot from CI/CD and things that you're mentioning there in this process. But we're also being very cognizant of the fact that not every data scientist has a strong desire to learn Git, for example, or version control and stuff like that. But it has a real impact on their ability to keep track of stuff. So how do we make that seamless, and how do you make it easy for them? I don't think anyone's really solved it completely. And if they have, it's usually in a niche, in a product, and over here. And then someone else comes out with a different product that solves a different problem. And then, how do you introduce that into your system? So there's some great philosophy that you brought up there about how you manage product. And when I think about, even when I look at my customer about what they're trying to do, they may come to me and say, well, I need a consultant to come in, a data scientist, to help solve this problem. And sometimes the conversation shifts to being like, well, what you really need is a MLOps team to help you make a factory to solve problems. And the conversation goes from that problem, that churn problem, whatever the business problem is, and say, well, let's talk more about the customer journey overall. And then there's 4 or 5, 6, 7 models in there now. Now you need a factory to address all of those models. And having the same people involved in solving all those models is very beneficial to them as well, because you don't have to hire a new person to solve every problem. So there's a lot of benefits to the business of thinking about these problems a little larger. And it's amazing to me. What I'm really surprised about is our advisor, our AI ML advisory services is also taking off. Is that people are actually, Atos, has been around for a while, but they didn't see us as someone that would come and actually give you advice on your ML and AI execution to solve business problems. That's our number one selling thing. And it's like, I'm shocked. I mean, when I was at Deloitte, we definitely had advisory and stuff like that, but I borrow from it and steal from it in order to assemble these consulting pods. Now to be in this weird spot where we have these pedigree of data scientists that understand the engineering so they can work with other data scientists, work with business problems. People are really latching on to that, like, wow, okay, well, you can come in and you can help us look holistically at a machine to help solve problems. I can get the ROI. I can get a business reporting dashboard out of that to prove that I'm solving problems. And then you can leave and I can do it myself. And they're like, this is too good to be true. And it sounds like an ad, and it is an ad, because it's an ad not just for me doing this, but it's for the industry to really think about it as a solvable problem and work off of a plan. Because if you don't, a lot of these organizations, I see this, they start building their own tools or they have ad hoc systems. And it's so hard when they're compartmentalized or siloed to put those back together. And we spend so much time trying to put these pieces back together. I really urge organizations to be innovative about it and think of this as, how can we build a process that works for our entire organization? How can we do this so we get the full value out of AI/ML? And then what are the consequences if we don't? The consequences are, if you're in a particular industry, that you're going to lose the advantage. You're going to not be able to keep up with those who are. They're going to automate things. They're going to have better forecasting. They're going to have better insights, more visibility, and you're going to lose. And then, that's the message. I hate to be brutal about it, but the truth is that those industries who are not being the blockbusters, and this is the old analogy, not being the blockbusters, even though their operations are great, but they're not innovating, and being the Netflix who were able to innovate and almost destroy Blockbuster, of course, that old story. So there's a bit of both. I think that one hand talks to the other, is that I want to see a DevOps process within my MLOps process that's solid. I want to see a business solving problem discussion to go on simultaneously to that, so I can justify it. And I want these parties to be satisfied with the results as you go along and in the end state. And then I want people to come back to me 5 years, 10 years from now and say, well, the system and the thought process you put in place is still in place today. It's grown, but in a way that we have understanding of it. We've improved our capabilities, we've improved our bottom line, and the leadership and stuff that you gave us was all we needed in order to continuate this in a good way, in a good fashion, in a way that makes sense to everybody. Everybody's happy, and then they have the tools they need to do their job, and they're not leaving. And that's the other thing with data scientists. I don't have the tool I'm doing. I'm stuck in SAS. I'm stuck in this. I can't use Python. I can't use the tools I need to use. I'm going to quit and find another job. And that's the other thing that they're doing, is that literally they're like, at demand, I don't need to work here. You're not giving me the tools to solve my problems. I like solving problems. You're not giving me a platform to solve problems. I'm going to go quit. I'm going to go work somewhere else. And I hear that from organizations all the time. They're losing people because they don't give them the tools. Well, they don't give them the tools because they didn't have the process in place. And they had the process in place because they didn't see the value of it at the time. And they didn't see the value of the time because they didn't put the thought and education of why this matters. So it's kind of like, that's the pyramid, and that's how it is today. And that's why we're writing a book on kind of this process and how we're going to do it.
Yeah, I think you raise a bunch of good points there. I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is I read again the book Good to Great, which some people make fun of it. It's like because it's an old book, but there's parts of it that are really interesting about how what are the companies that were good and then they went got to great, and the idea in the book was that really a lot of it's just process, right? And if you look at companies that use technology, the one of the things that Tom, I think it's Tom Collins, I think that's who is the author of the book was, but he said that technology is a accelerator for a business that already has momentum. It's not like the thing you're inventing. And I think that's in particular one of the things that's kind of interesting about MLOps is that there's I think a misunderstood aspect of it, which is, oh wait, we're going to compete with Google or OpenAI or Hugging Face or something, and we're going to build our own like multi-billion parameter like LLM. It's like, no, you're not. You're not going to be doing that. They're doing it better than you. They're already doing it. But what you could do is you could actually use some of the things they've already built,
Right.
and then pick the things that are unique to your company
Yeah.
and maybe fine tune the model or build a
Right.
custom model. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge reusability aspect of it, taking it off the shelf and being able to reuse it. There's challenges with that from an infrastructure standpoint is that, I have my data over here and I have the idea that this model might be useful, and the time it takes to put those two together sometimes needs shrunk. So it needs shrunk, and it needs managed in a way that you can track your experimentations and things like that. There's a lot of technical challenge under the hood of MLOps. Word embeddings obviously are working very well, but in order to manage that differently for natural language processing, and that's useful for everything. Probably I can convert this language we're speaking right now to text on the fly. So, but that technology is not always accessible to every system and not every environment. So making that more accessible is important. Making it more trackable is more important, so you know what you're doing with your data is important for organization. And just generally having a place to do it. I can't say enough that it's not always there. There's organizations. There's a credit card company that we're doing a lot of stuff with right now, a very large one, and they simply want to do use what's called a GPU, as you know what that is. I'm sure that the audience is. They want to use a different method of computing in mass parallel to solve a particular problem. And the infrastructure just wasn't there to do that. So that we would go in and we would help marry some of the open source tools that are already out there that didn't support that type of computer. And then once you do it, now the trick is that's great. It's not really rocket science per se. It's hard, but it's not. The trick is now doing it the right way, doing it so you can repeat it. The dry method. This is something that's been popular in the Python world. I saw you were in Django at one point. Adrian Halivardi came from my group, and he announced it there. Actually, Django at the group, and dry was a big thing. Don't repeat yourself. And I learned that from engineering. Data scientists could totally benefit from that 110%, right? Because that's what I see. I see that constantly repeating yourself, or doing a lot of data engineering in order to get the data features in the way that you want. And then some clever people, I think at Uber with Michelangelo or somewhere, came up with a feature store idea and said, well, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be smart if we cache some of that data in between? And then now it's really taken off. Everyone's asking us about it. And I think they trickled off into Tecton and now Feast. But there's a lot of choices there. And but the advantages are huge, because now I don't have to do that again. That 80% of time that I spent doing that for the first time, well, now it's 20%. Now it's 10%. Now I can build another model off of it. And it's like people are scratching their heads, like, why didn't we do that before? That would have been really, really smart. And well, we didn't have the infrastructure. Containerization was harder. People, Kubernetes came out. There's other technology out that made this possible. So there's a lot of reasons why we didn't do it before. But now there's no excuse. There's no excuse why you wouldn't be doing that. And then people come in and say, well, wow, governance around AI is really tricky. And we're doing it too. We're parsing resumes at the state level and stuff like that. So we have to be very, very careful with some of the features we're using. And where does the business get to see that? Well, we found that this feature, this process, this MLOps thing I'm talking about, can give you visibility also on top of that. That you can say, well, you can't use this feature in this model. And why do you know you can't use it? Well, because we didn't put it where you could use it.
Yeah, that is a good point you bring up about the feature stores. It makes the problem knowable, where if it's completely unstructured data in S3, then in theory, someone could get it. Right, it's there, so they could kind of, scoop it up.
Right, and there's nothing prevents these feature stores from using S3 and cheap storage as its back end, kind of like Snowflake did with its thinking too. There's nothing that prevents us from doing smart things in that space too. But what's really missing is that understanding of why we're doing this, and continuously contextualizing that to solving these problems is very important for everyone. It's important for the business. It's important for the technologies that are building an ops system. It's important for infrastructure, IT support, security, change management, project management should know about it. And then when I go to deliver this now, I don't give you, so here's my MLOps experts. Here's also my cloud architect. Here's my project manager. Here's my change management person too. And people are, wow, change management. I need change management to do MLOps. I was like, Yeah, actually, you do, because you're all going to be thinking about it differently. And guess what? We're going to give the business a different dashboard to look at how well this is working. And they need to understand that. They need to understand a little bit about prediction in general. And we're going to make it easy for them. And then it does make sense then. So some of these engagements where I'm looking for a staff aug data scientist to help optimize my LSTM, similar to your story, turns into a different story. It turns into, well, maybe you need an MLOps, or maybe you need several project teams to help solve these problems. Maybe you need to think about it differently. And long as you're providing 10x value, which we are in some cases, no sweat 10x value, but long as you're providing that value, the investment is well worth it. And we have a lot of data about that now. So if someone comes to me and says, what is my ROI going to be on this MLOps system? I actually can tell you. I can go and look at other industries. I can look at other studies that are out there. I can look at the types of problem you're solving. I can guess. And I can tell you how many swings you need to take to get there. And it's usually more than one. And so you get 9 use cases a year or something like that. Is what
I was just reading a few different, I mean, a lot of people know this that are kind of, know about what's happening, but like, I forgot, it's like 80-90%, depending on which study, of companies that are trying to do AI just are not. They've done nothing, right? Because as the stuff
thought labs or something like that. Yeah. So
yeah,
one of those. And and only 40% of these projects are successful, enormously successful.
So even if they are delivered, like
but the ones that are successful, there might be a big but these ones that are successful are so wildly successful, it makes up for all the others. So the thing is that's why you got to take a lot of swings. And like that, when I hear people toe dipping in the space, I say, well, we're going to pick one use case and we're going to try this, and if it doesn't work, we're going to give up on AI and ML forever. And I'm like, well, wait a minute here. I'm telling you, walking into this, it might not exactly work the way you planned. You might learn a lot of things from the process, though, and that might have value too. You might learn a lot about your data. No one's ever said to me, don't show me something about my data. But take more swings. Take more swings. You'll get more success. But so when you want to do that, what do you need to do to take more swings? Well, you need to be kind of organized about how you do it. And you need to make it optimized and inexpensive and visible and all these good things. So that's what we talk about. We talk about.
And would you say that, basically one of the things I think we're getting at is that there are some anti-patterns, and I mean a few that come to mind that are in the space would be the bespoke system is probably maybe one of the worst anti-patterns, which is there's a person who's writing their own MLOps platform from scratch, and that's their current strategy.
I mean, Gardner would call that your maverick data scientist, I think, in some ways, or something like that. But well, there's a build versus buy spectrum always, and even in MLOps. What happened in a lot of these organizations is that they did do that, and then they had siloed products, and now we're talking about deprecating some products that someone put a lot of sweat, tears into a lot of years, and now we want to combine them. And that's a difficult conversation, to give up your baby at that point if it does work. And then oftentimes it doesn't work, and the data scientist or the ML ops engineer gets frustrated, and they decide to research more, and they find out there are products that do what you're already doing. And there's so many sites right now and so many people keeping track on it, yourself included, Noah, and I follow you closely, that you're keeping track on things. And there's a lot going on. There's a lot to navigate, but usually you're right. It's not the right answer to start building up your own ML.
Well, and even further, one of the things that I think is an interesting problem with the building your own system is, even if you are successful, I saw this scenario happen when I was working at a Fortune 10 company, and they had a problem where they had maybe like 1,000 developers that needed to have a logging solution for monitoring and search and all that stuff. And believe it or not, a guy built it. He was very intelligent.
And they called it Splunk later on.
Well, that's what happened. Was he was so smart and so good that he then got hired at Google, and 3 months later the system broke, and they could have probably fixed it, but they were like, let's just spend $1 million on Splunk.
That's why I don't know. You know, Brian Fitzpatrick used to talk about this at Google when he joined. Before he did talk and other things, a friend of mine back in the day actually wrote Subversion back in the day. I don't remember that, but Brian Fitzpatrick used to talk about that there are no, there's no such thing as this rock star wizard engineer. You know, basically that it's a bad idea. That, and then it kind of goes back to the whole idea of being collaborative in data scientists too. The greatest problems aren't being solved in someone's basement in a laboratory anymore either. You know, they're being solved together collaboratively. So, you know, we embrace that already from the engineering perspective, and even like GitHub and the concepts there, we embrace that now. Now we're trying to embrace that from the data science perspective too, is how do we collaborate better? How do we work together on solving problems? How do we not be that person who's trying to solve all the problems in the world at their desk by themselves, or, you know, in their office, you have to shove pizzas under the door. But, you know, and that's really kind of challenging personality wise for a lot of data scientists too, is because, you know, I want to spend a certain amount of my percentage of my time solving problems locked away. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then you have to come up for air and you have to collaborate. The more we can make it easier to do that, the better off they are. That it should be seamless, and it should be easy, and it should make sense, and communication should be streamlined. So we talk about that too, is like, okay, if I have my notebooks over here and I'm just experimenting with something, and you have your notebooks over here and you're experimenting with something, can we talk about this? Can we have a conversation around it? And then, you know, there's all these challenges with data about being in those notebooks too that we try to solve too. But in the end, you're right. That maverick data scientist sitting there writing an MLOps platform from scratch in a large organization generally is a bad idea.
Even if they're successful.
Even if they're successful.
And I think that's one of those which I agree with your original premise, which is it's the process that's important. And when you get caught up into these shiny objects like building your own MLOps platform, that's one I've seen. And the other one I think that's kind of related is kind of what with what you were just talking about is someone could also build a brilliant solution, but then they actually solve the wrong problem because there is a feedback loop missing between the decision makers in the company and the data scientists. So maybe the CEO said, hey, we want to keep track of all the inventory and build a computer vision system that shows us a count in real time. And then they build like, you know, a inventory prediction system. You know, it's like, that's not what I asked. You built something that was perfect.
Yeah.
Every possible metric with machine learning, you've nailed it. In fact, you used, you know, platforms, used our process, the ticket system was great, you communicated, and still you built the wrong thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to kind of wrap things up, I guess, I'm not sure how much time I have here too, but I think we entered into this conversation at a good place, saying that, you know, process is important, and I think we agree on that. And a way of thinking about it is important. Market should drive demand for this, right? So it should be, the business problem should be theirs to be solved, and that should marry what you're working on. Like in this case, you said you solved the wrong problem, and to think a little bit about it right now. If I were to move forward with, you know, writing a book, and hopefully, you know, I've been working on that. I have published before for Python, but you know, it would be interesting to have a lot of perspectives in it. So I'm looking for the community to talk about this process. I want to add visibility to our 10 steps process, and I want to open it up for contributions, you know, for questions and things like that. And I want to be a good listener too. What I'm hearing from the business sometimes from this is that I'm a top-down thinker, you know, and you're solving my problem with all these bottom-up thinkers, and, you know, where do the two meet, you know? And so that process has to be very aware of that. And I think that's what's kind of missing sometimes. You can see so far where we're at with our ML's journey with some of these products, even like the feature story, it's far from where it needs to be. It's far from where it should be regarding about transforms and a lot of things. But what I encourage is that we continue reaching out to other experts, talking about this problem, in the context of solving real business problems, world problems. One of the ones that we're solving, the opioid crisis. We work for the University of Texas, the opioid crisis, and published about that. And we're solving real world problems here sometimes with some of this technology. And I think there's a value chain of every person that's involved in that conversation. I think everybody has an important input in this. I think consumers have important input in this. Business have important input in it. Making the right decisions about those 200 products I talked about too, for your organization has the right value in it. There's a trust factor in it. There's a governance factor in it. There's ethical problem. You cannot take people out of this process or it's just not going to work. If I see some big monolithic organization develop a software to solve this problem and push it into the marketplace, which I kind of see that happening here and here, I get really skeptical. I say, well, where is that conversation? Are you sure it's handling the ethical, governance, security, problem solving, problems with all the people aspects, handling different profiles of data scientists? Is it handling the data correctly? Is it performant? Probably not. So we're really looking at an ecosystem here, and we're looking at an ecosystem partners. We're looking at an ecosystem of hyperscalers, and more importantly, foremost, we're looking at a bunch of people who have really good ideas that should be heard, have a conversation, and figure out what the best solution is. All I'm doing is I'm creating a gateway of thinking about it, a process for thinking about it. Here's the area where you talk about this. Here's the area where you talk about this. Here's the area where you talk about this. What goes in that box is up to all the people that are involved in the conversation. And that's where I'm at right now. So that I said I got about 10 steps to think about here. A big process takes about 12 months. Here's that month 2, what generally we're talking about. It's not waterfall, but I can use agile and I can still make it work with my organization wise. But it is compartmentalized a little bit, thinking about, I just want to talk about discovery over here. I want to talk about building and production models here. I want to talk about our data problems here. So it's really important to go at it like with some sort of framework of thinking about it, because then you do end up with a lot of different ways of going about it, and all these people aspects get into the mix, and they never get it done. And the organizations try to do it themselves. It doesn't seem to get there where they need to be, or there's big gaps, or people aren't dissatisfied with the end product. Now we've seen that people are happy with their end product when they go through this process. So
yeah, I think a checklist concept is really important. And like I do that myself when I'm even looking at like DevOps, even though I've written books, multiple books on it, that I'll go to the AWS website, or I'll go to Google or whatever, and I'll just look at what they say. And then they have like a checklist of stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. This is, microservices. Yeah, that's true. Those are good. I think you have to have a common frame of reference to tell the people in your company, like, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is what good is. And we need to follow these steps.
Yeah, good. And I think there's requirements all along the way. And I think that when people see where you need to go with this, sometimes it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming saying, well, there's a lot I got to think about here. If I do this wrong, these models could be wrong and I could do something bad.
Well, so maybe that would be like a couple things to like, as we close down a little bit, like a couple different things to think about would be, one question I have for you is where do you see us at in terms of what is going to happen, like in terms of the journey? Like I personally am thinking we're like at 1% or 0.5% of what MLOps and AI and ML is going to get to. I mean, what are your thoughts in the next 5-10 years?
Well, that's not very optimistic, but I think it might be 5. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I think that it is unfair to say that we're doing it wrong in all aspects. And that's something else we want to take in consideration when you're making transformations in MLOps is I don't think the intent should be go in and reinvent the wheel. I think sometimes it is taking pieces that are already working and enabling those differently, and coming to a common level of language about how to refer to things, coming to that diction about how to refer to MLOps aspects. I think single pane of glass, human in the loop, all these things, they need a little bit uncovered and discussed a little bit so that we get to a common way to talk about it. And then there does need to be an operating mentality, thought of what's good and what's not. There is in DevOps, I think now, and you wrote about it, But I think that needs to happen in MLOps still. I think that there are pieces of it laying around, but I think it needs to be unified a little bit about how to go about thinking about it, of what is good and how to get there. And then once you have that, there's a lot of flexibility in how you get there. And I think that's fine. I think people like flexibility. And I don't think that if you did write a piece of it, it would only be a piece of it usually. Or if you did have a piece that needs to be custom, it's only a piece of it. You're not reinventing the wheel often. So I think it's really those two things, really about a common way to talk about it and a common way to think about the process. And those two may be the same in some ways, but the third thing I would add on to it is a common way to measure it. And when I think about measuring data science problems, it's much, much easier to measure data science solutions than you think. Most people think, at least. That if there's true ROI around it, it's the tip of the iceberg, right? If there's true ROI around it, it's very measurable. I can say I saved this number of hours, I had this personnel cut, or the ability to do things faster, smarter, whatever. I can do that in a way that I can show and report on that as we go along the journey. So those three things: common way to talk about it as far as language goes, and way that we refer to things close enough, at least. And that's always been a challenge in our space. And like confusion matrix has been confusing because it came from statistics and data science and stuff. So a common way to talk about it, a common way to go through a process of looking at it so that you look at little pieces. So it's not overwhelming. So you look at one piece at a time in this order sort of thing. And then finally, a common way to measure it so that you can validate and justify that your expenditures or your investment in this technology and this thought is actually paying off. And it does. I know it does. I've seen it. But it takes a lot of, it should take some continuous monitoring on that.
Well, and I guess what I was referring to is that I suspect that we are going to get better and better at operationalizing things and having better process. And I think the stuff you bring up is really good point. And I hope people will find out how to find more information about it. What I suspect is going to happen is what I meant by the 0.5% or 1% is that what I think people are not prepared for is how much machine learning models are going to be like essentially everywhere,
Yeah.
and that they're going to become part of what we do every day. Like one of the ones that is really one of the things that happened just recently that's kind of changed my optimism to make it even more optimized, or to make myself even more thinking of how AI and ML is going to be ubiquitous, is the GitHub Copilot. That the amount of, because I haven't stopped writing code, even though I'm almost 50, I still write kind of the code like at the level I was when I was 20. But this is the first tool I've ever had in my life where I'm looking at what I can do, and I'm like, wow, I can write maybe 10 or even 100 times faster code that's high quality just by using this one tool.
Yeah.
And then you start to look at what other kind of tools are going to start to become available. And I think maybe people are not prepared for is the exponential component to productivity from putting all this stuff into the common space.
No doubt. No doubt. I haven't looked at that tool in particular, but I'm also almost 50. So I've been along that journey too. And, it's amazing how far we've come, with the ability to think about, testing and also, automation of things in daily life. And we see it everywhere, right? I mean, your life is improved, I hope, in some ways by AI and ML today. But there's some theories about whether, how assistive it should be, and there's some ethics concerns that really matter. And that's why these good systems are important. When they're designed, they take those into considerations about how you're going to interact with the human. So that's assistive, and when it should be assistive versus when it shouldn't.
Well, I think that was maybe the other topic I was, before I forget to bring this up, is that fits with everything you're bringing up, is that I think many organizations have not paid enough attention to the data governance aspect of the machine learning models that they're currently using, and in particular, even the biggest ones in the world. I think a good one to look at is YouTube, in that obviously people that work at Google are smart. Obviously, I mean, there I know many of them, and but one of the issues that I think is going to be very interesting is if there is legislation that occurs in the future, could Google go to the EU, for example, which I think is maybe where some of it could come from, and could they tell the EU, hey, yeah, this is exactly what our recommendation does, and here's why we do it?
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know if they can. And then can you justify the ethical components of like the recommendation engine serving out, you know, toxic content to toxic people and connecting them, and that kind of stuff, or meta or whatever. And so I think that's one of the ones that for companies that care about future problems in the MLOps space, that are thinking ahead, is that's why you do want to have really good organizational process and really good insights and platforms and tools, so that if there is, and I suspect there is going to be some legislation in the next 5 years on AI, that
Mhm.
you can actually back it up. You can
Yeah,
back it up
and
most.
you'll need to, right? I mean, it's there, right? It's there where people are asking questions already about why this prediction predicted this. I mean, you see it in the media. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that the data governance, if you call that data governance, model governance,
Yeah.
yeah, ethics, responsible AI. There's a lot of terms for it, and that's the other problem, is that we're not really, as an industry, we're not mature and calling things the same thing sometimes. But there's a lot of challenges there. There's some core beliefs and concepts that can be baked into a system, just similar to how you mentioned with version control and code control with writing software. There's some things about writing models that could be baked into there to help protect us a little bit about explainability, and what's used and lineage. There are ways to kind of address it better. Is it being used right now? I know we are in the systems that we're helping build right now, but they didn't have it there before, and I kind of think that a lot of places aren't, and it's not just being thought about that way yet. It'll be You'll be ahead of yourself, much to your point, if you start thinking about that now. But there's also a great value in being transparent about what you're doing anyway. So there's, if you build a recommendation system for someone, to give them the reasons why you're giving that recommendation, not only is it a good thing to do for transparency, but it's a good thing to do for the person that's getting the recommendation, because they learn to trust the system more, and they embrace it more. So there's some core thinking there about like the right way to kind of do it and think about it. That gets lost sometimes because we're so focused on building a faster car, a faster machine, where that's not necessarily the problem we need to solve right now. We don't need you don't need a faster prediction necessarily. What you need is a more explainable one, a more manageable one, and one that's useful. So I think that, yeah, absolutely. That's a big concern of mine as well, is that if we don't start thinking about these things like very soon, then it's going to we'll be forced to, and then it's going to be kind of like, since you said you're almost 50, you remember Y2K bugs and stuff like that. It was like, you got
Mhm.
to get ready for that, or you're not going to be,
Yeah, I mean, that's a good. I think the one that I've been telling, like, I have a 15-year-old son, and I've been telling him that he should read a book a week. And the reason I say he should read a book a week is that look at the duration of time it took for someone to write a book, right? It's probably a year or 2 years. And so you're taking you're creating a model, right? You're squeezing information into this ML model, which is, your brain, and you're getting like high quality signals. The typical person, especially in America, the majority of the content they read, someone took an hour or 2 hours to create it, and it's being served up from a recommendation engine. So you look at the two different inputs, right? You have one column which is all stuff that took two years to build, and one of them, the other column, is 2 hours to build. What's that going to do to someone's brain? And
yeah,
I think that's an interesting ethical one.
I never
you
thought of
know
that.
yeah.
I like
And
that.
maybe the last ethical one I'll say is the where it fits with what you said earlier about the process is that I know there was something recently from Google Drive where they scan for bad images or prohibited images, and then someone's account got locked out and they got sent to the police. I think that's another one that I think is an interesting one is like who's putting data into your machine learning system, and do you know actually if it's been poisoned, right? Like you have a well in the city, did someone poison the well, and what happens? Like, and I was at the AI day last year with Elon Musk, and I think he was joking about it. I think if I remember, he put on like a stop shirt or something like that and said, kind of laughing about it. It's like, but no, but you're laughing about it, but you can actually you can poison a car and tell it to learn the wrong thing. And I,
Mhm.
and I think some of these things like I think are very interesting problems in the future that if there is legislation, does it, like, I think is a great analogy you bring up. Is it a Y2K problem? Like, whoops, now what do we do?
Yeah, I think you're right about it is a data governance problem and understanding what's in your data problem and understanding the consequences problem. Yeah, I mean, there's so many low hanging fruit to be solved in the space of AI and ML2 that I see people going after these kind of hard problems sometimes. I also am a big believer in solving some of the simpler problems first.
Mhm.
Some of those simpler problems have less consequences sometimes if they go wrong. So I tend to be more primitive about my approaches. Sometimes when I think about use case selection, I think about whether it's going to be a quick win or a disturbance, or if it's disruptive or whatever. And I kind of position those use cases so they're appropriate for what the person requesting or the society in some cases that's requesting AI, what matches, what's appropriate for them. It's like, well, I only need you to just tell me if someone's happy or sad. I hear that all the time. And well, okay, that's great, but don't you want to know why? Don't you want to know why they're happy or sad, or if they went from happy to sad? There's a transition there. Or, I challenge these problems sometimes quite a bit. But yeah, I think that we don't need to work that hard to find a lot of use cases. Like I go to any business these days, it's surprising. I had one meeting earlier today. I found 13 AI and ML use cases for just one little area in a meeting, 13. And any one of those could be worth $1 million, $2 million if it's solved. So it's like, wow, I can do that. That's so easy. It's easy for me. And I'm not really stressing out about it. It's easy for everyone, and we need to start thinking about that. We should start solving some problems. The really, really hard problems still there, and I respect that. And I think that we've taken on some, like I said, we try to predict downtimes for roller coasters and stuff like that with sensors on roller coasters. There's 6,000 sensors, a signal every 2 milliseconds for all of them. It's a lot of data. It's hard, but then there's all these other problems too. Is like, are you trafficking people correctly through the theme park? I mean, you could use machine learning for that too. So it's really kind of, to me, the conversation should include the risk, the value, the proposition. You should lay it out in a way. Come about dialogue again for the business, and let's get used to talking about use cases in this space and position them in these buckets of whether they're going to be quick wins or not. Know what you're going to invest, know the chances that it's going to succeed, know what data you're going to use, and kind of know it, and get used to knowing it. Like getting used to, okay, next time I'm doing a MLOps, I'm going to look at these same things. I'm going to look at the ethical side of it, responsible side of it. I'm going to look at the data side of it. I'm going to look at the SME side of it. I'm going to look at how quick it's going to take, and then I get really used to it, used to building. And I think that makes it a lot easier. I think that makes it a lot easier for people to grasp onto and to use and say, well, you know what, I'll bring the use cases to you. And I never touched a line of, let's say that I've never touched a line of Python or R code. But I know now how to develop these use cases as a business owner or business analyst. I'll bring you use cases. Maybe I can start using some of these tools a little bit myself and learn a little bit about the data. But that's, I think that's where a happier whole, system is that we can start collaborating around it in a good way. The fear aspects, responsible aspects don't go away. I mean, they're still there, but you can kind of marry those with the problem. If
Yeah,
I'm doing a
and if
self-driving
you have a
car, I'm doing the risk.
yeah, and if you and I guess what I was getting at is that I agree with you. Like you can't only focus on the negative stuff, but if you have a process that's repeatable, then at least it's possible for you to address those problems in the future. If you have no process, then you should probably be afraid
Yeah, you can make
because
the same
the,
mistake over and over.
yeah, it could be game over if it
Or you leave, a data scientist leaves the job and they build
yeah.
another model on their laptop and they use the wrong data and no one told them knowledge transfer and they release the production and you're using the wrong data to identify people, match them with jobs or whatever, there's a lot of mistakes that can be made if you don't do it right. But, I think you and I are sharing the same belief that, hey, we know we've solved this problem on the DevOps side. We've solved this problem in engineering side a little bit. We're pretty comfortable with that now. I wasn't when I began my career. I think DevOps didn't exist. I mean, DevOps wasn't a word, but now we do. Now we know what it is, and I think MLOps is there too. It's becoming known.
Yeah.
It's becoming known.
So how I think you have some very good ideas and interesting ideas. How would someone that wanted to know about your 10 steps, learn, stuff from you, like let's say you a few times a week talk about these topics, or like I mean I think a lot of the things that you're doing because you get access to customers are probably really valuable to people. Where do they find out more?
A good question. I mean, you could try finding me on Twitter. Brian Ray is my handle. LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is associated with this episode, so you can find me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn with me there. Stay tuned to some of the media sources and stuff like that because I'm publishing based off of those. You'll see it. You'll see it there. I think that really the key is that I am embracing conversation too. So if I have a meeting with one person and have a successful meeting, let's say no one watches this. Hope they do, but let's say no one watches. I would still find great value. I've learned from you here already, and I find that true to a lot of places. So I think embracing that conversation is important. If you're a blunt organization you think suffers from not having this, we're always looking for new clients. If you're a practitioner and you want to do this, we're hiring like crazy. If you are a student and you want to know about like where to get more information on some of these topics and stuff, I can give you my reading list. I don't know if it's as good as Noah's reading list. You might want to ask Noah too. But there's a lot of ways. But I'm around. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm happy to help any way I can.
What about hiring? Like, what would you recommend? The things you're looking for in hiring. What are the skills and traits that people have?
Well, I'm looking for experience right now. I don't hire junior folks hardly right now at all. So if you've done it, it is hard to find. So if you've done engineering and data science and you have experience, then you probably will make it well in my team. The other thing that's different about this team, and no offense to my Deloitte colleagues or whoever other I've managed in the past, is this team's like a family. And we really rally around continuous learning, and we spend a lot of time doing delivery for clients. We also spend a lot of time talking amongst ourselves about how to make our process better to bring to other clients, and doing R&D and participating in conversations and trying new tools and stuff like that. So it comes with a lot of work and a lot of passion that has to come with it. I let my team decide who's on the team usually. I mean, I'm the one that signs the ticket as a hiring manager, but I listen to them a lot. So during the interview process, we have exercises sometimes to go through and think about MLOps problems and present on them. And if you're able to articulate why and have a conversation around it, and you have that experience, you have a good chance of making it on the team. And if you did all that, you probably will have a good chance of staying on this team, because once you get here, you'll be among a lot of people who are like-minded. So, that's what the thing is. We haven't had as much movement as in the outside of our group as we've witnessed in the industry. And I think that's because we've created our own internal kind of thought and community think tank, if you will, on the topic. And it's very fun if you are into that sort of thing.
Well, the president of Caltech, when I was working, I worked in the administration when I was at Caltech, and I remember the former president would always come by and just kind of chat with me and stuff. And I was asking him for career advice because I was in my early 20s, and he said the number one factor for whether you should stay at a company is whether you're learning. If you're not learning, leave. And so, like, unfortunately, a lot of companies, people are not learning. But if you are lucky enough to be at a company where, with what you just described, you're just constantly learning and everybody in your team is learning, that's hard to actually find.
We can learn, yeah, and we are, and that we're good at that. We're good at learning. We're good at wanting to learn and figure out what we need to learn to help add value. But then usually it goes that way. People can be either more specialized in some areas or sometimes more managerial too. There's a lot of managerial type, and not only just managerial of people, other consultants in my group, because we're consultancy. You know, we do consultancy. So sometimes our clients are looking for leadership. Our clients are looking for someone to come in and voice and mitigate and communicate and do all those things that leaders have to do. That's really fun when you're able to do that successfully. It's really painful when you're not, but that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for leadership. I'm looking for people that really love what they're doing and they want to make a change and they want to help people and they want to participate in the conversation. They want to bring people in the conversation. They want to get perspectives. They want to be open and transparent about their decision making, and they lead by example and they work their butts off. And that's really where I'm at with it. Is like, if you can give me a leader that knows all these things, that's the unicorn, right? I got strong engineering chops. I've got data science understanding. Maybe I don't have a PhD, but I got a cloud degree, and I've got maybe a graduate degree. I've got experience on managing people, and I'm a nice person, and but nobody's perfect. And I embrace failure a lot. Both in our process is built for failure, and we want failure. If we're not failing, we're not doing it right. So we take a lot of swings. We have a lot of huge successes. We've been able to obtain some amazing client lists. You wouldn't believe it, however we're at right now. I can't believe it. I'm amazed in ourselves sometimes. But really, the key is happiness. Really find a happiness, wanting to show up to work every day and trying to want to collaborate, want to research those tools, want to find the best solution. Not perfection necessarily, but perfectionists sometimes have a hard time in this field too, because it's hard to be perfect, but definitely striving to make improvements.
Yeah. I teach a lot of people for the first time to do DevOps, MLOps, Python programming at the university level. And these are very, very smart people. And the thing I always tell them is that they always like, what do I do? What do I do? I want to learn. And it's like, okay, well, here's the goal: is how many failures per week do you have? Yeah. And they're like, what? And they're like, no, this is a KPI, is every day fail, just constantly fail, because eventually you will then be successful. If you're not failing, you're probably not learning anything.
Exactly. I say that all the time. And I don't know who coined the phrase, but I say it all the time. If you're not failing, you're not learning. Literally in my team meeting this morning, I said the same thing. So yeah, I think you're a like mind, and I appreciate you. I really do. And I've been, like I said, I followed you for a long time.
Cool. Well, hopefully we'll keep chatting. And I mean, from what you're saying, I think a lot of people I know will hit you up and try to get a job. And we'll also put this on O'Reilly, and I'm sure a lot of people will be hitting you up, because it sounds like a fun place to work.
We're a great place to work. Consulting in general is not for everyone. I'll say that right now. If you're an academic coming straight to consulting, that's why I was at Caltech the first time, and Emory and other places, and even I think Northwestern too, is I gave little talks about, hey, it's kind of hard to go from academia straight to consulting, and here's what you got to think about. And I also have people coming from overseas that we're sponsoring to be here in the US. That's out of their choice. Same thing. There's a lot of culture. There's a lot of thinking that you have to align with. There's a lot of people skills and stuff like that. And I don't discourage it. I just think that you want to position yourself for success like anything else, and you want to be flexible enough to know that you may have to communicate differently in consulting than you did at school.
Yeah, and I would say that actually, because I am a consultant myself, yeah, is that there's literally no faster way to learn something than to work in consulting. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand about why it is actually a good thing to be a consultant is because where else are you going to learn to work with 6 companies at the same time, right? Like you're not going to learn as fast. You're not going to learn as fast if you're just at one company. And I would say if you want to learn something in the hottest space possible, you probably would want to join a consulting company because you're going to be able to learn all those different signals at the same time.
No, I definitely agree. It's a great place to learn. You get a good industry insights across the board. You also get to partner. We have a really strong partnership with GCP and AWS. I'm sure you get to we work as them for them sometimes too, and you get insights into their process. And it's a great place to learn. But I think that the learning how to learning how to learn, that's the key. Is a little bit about how do you approach the learning aspect as you're delivering. And I don't expect people to know everything. I think it's ridiculous to know everything, but I expect them to know how to go learn something, and that's kind of really a lost art. I mean, I remember when we were kids, we would go to the library and we knew how to get around the Dewey Decimal System, whatever you called it, and it seems really silly now, but hey, that's how we learned, and that's how we operated. So you got to do the same thing today. You got to figure out where do you find the information? And you got to build relationships too, because sometimes the knowledge isn't on paper. Sometimes it's in someone else's head of what they're thinking. And you got to learn how to have a conversation and build friends and build networks and stuff like that. So it is a tricky space. I won't get it wrong, but I wouldn't do anything different. I love it. I love the space. And a lot of people that work for me do too. And our clients really appreciate us, and they see us as different now. A lot of times consultants aren't very loved in organizations, but sometimes we are kind of loved, and we're do hybrid team. We work together with them very closely. So it's really refreshing to be this type of consultant in this space today.
Well, and I'm actually, when I was working in industry for other people, I would always hire consultants. So
Thank you.
I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
I do too, actually.
Yeah, it's like, why would I not hire an expert who knows more than me to embed with my team? It's like, it's if you can, you're at the scale where that's possible, it's kind of a no-brainer in my opinion.
Yeah, I believe so too, and it does make sense for them. But I also understand if I were on the other side of the fence, if I'm in an organization, enterprise, and I have the challenges of hiring poor consultants, and I have to be subjected to that, and it's not going the way I wish. It does happen too. I mean, some of our competition is lost, and I hear it, and we pick up after them sometimes. And I don't know if it's because they have a lack of passion for it, or they're on wrong motives or whatever, but it's just kind of it's a waste of time sometimes, some of them. And I don't ever want to become that, but it exists that there are. And then I do feel bad for those enterprises that if you have hired the wrong consultancy, then you have to live with that decision for a while. Thankfully it's not permanent, but it's good to vet. I don't believe in RFPs and stuff like that, but it's good to vet with yourself. Is just ask yourself, can I learn something from this person that's in front of me now? And can I have a conversation with them? Can they listen to what needs I have as a business, or as even if I'm an IT leader or lead data scientist, can I make these people useful to me? Will they be sensitive to what we've already built? Will they be sensitive to what our data scientists want to accomplish? Will they align with the timelines that we're going? There's a lot of factors here. So part of what we've done is navigate. We have a sales engineering group just dedicated to our AI and ML, and that's what they do is they navigate that conversation before you even hit the ground and make sure we're a good fit. And I've done it before. I said, well, we're not a good fit. Like, well, we want to hire you. So, well, we're not a good fit. Like, well, you're not going to do. Well, we'll give you a bunch of money. We'll do it. And well, we're not a good fit. This is not our business. I'm sorry. And the partners in my firm are what are you doing? But but it's real. It's real that you should make good decisions. And even if it's hyperspace, MLOps, oh my gosh, Web 3.0, make good decisions. Ask the questions. Figure out if it's a good use case for you. Figure out what their plan is. Make sure you're getting the value out of it. Be a good buyer.
Yeah, I mean, I've done both. I mean, I've hired consultants who have done amazing things, and I've hired ones that just never delivered. And I would say the things that you brought up are all on the good checklist, which is that you show results like incrementally. I mean, I think that's here's how you to know you have a bad consultant is that the projects like in the future in 6 months there's this magic, like a magic show that appears. Like you're basically you screwed up. If from the very beginning there's a conversation, they work with you, there's like a weekly kind of thing or 2 week or whatever it is where there's progress and you get to see the whole system, then you're probably successful. Like
Yeah,
it's that simple.
I mean, that's agile, really. I
It's
mean,
agile, exactly. Like if you're getting results from it, and like you said, you respect the people you work with, and you're learning stuff from them, then I would say the signs are very good. On the flip side, if you don't really know what's happening, and like you're gonna get something in 6 months, be careful.
right. You don't want that. I mean, you don't want to just, here it is. I mean, obviously that doesn't work. One thing I would caution a little bit. So the difference, and I've been an engineer a long time myself too, before I got into this space. And sometimes there is some headspace needed. So I kind of compartmentalize some of this as where it's not exactly predictable how long in the data science process exploration will take. You may take longer because you're finding good things, not because you're not getting it done. So I have to be respectful a little bit of the headspace, I call it, of data science. And that's built into our thinking too, is that we know that walking into this, but we can still show value and throughout the process and continuously demonstrate that we're providing that value as we go along. But, there are a few differences where I can't exactly always pin down. And that makes the whole business side of contractual business side that we've gotten down now. It took me 3 years to get there because it was hairy. It was like, well, we want to do this for a fixed fee, or we're getting some funding from the source and this is what you're going to get, and it's exactly the deliverable timeline. I'm like, wait a minute here, let's do this design for success here and think about it, milestones and different ways of going about managing the project, so that if you do need more time on little pieces of it that are very valuable, that it doesn't appear that you're totally dropping the ball or something like that. So we've gotten better at that, and it's hard. That's hard.
Cool. Well, really learned a lot from talking to you.
Yeah, same.
And maybe we'll be doing some things together in the future. I'm enjoying thinking about everything we talked about, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thanks for taking the time, Noah. It was fun
Sure.
talking to you. All right.
Okay.